Hey, this is Andy.
And Randy.
And we're here on AT Corner.
Being an athletic trainer comes with ups and downs, and we're here to showcase it all.
Join us as we share our world in sports medicine.
Welcome back to another episode of AT Corner. This week's story episode was actually suggested by one of our listeners. What are we talking about today?
Today we were talking about adrenaline dump. So Maddie D said, after spine boarding, I was so shaken up. My heart was racing the whole night and I was so anxious. I realized that I was never taught how to manage that stress as an AT or take care of myself when it's not even me that's hurt. I'd love an episode on how we can do that, and I bet a lot of others need it out there too. So today we are talking about adrenaline dumps after an emergency situation.
This is a cool topic because you're right. This isn't really talked about.
No. Not until it happens.
Yeah, until it happens, and then everyone's like, "Oh yeah, here comes
this is it." Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and the worst part is if you still have to continue working,
which usually you do.
Yeah.
When does an emergency happen? Like right at the end.
Exactly.
I mean, there have been some.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And
some that have been very, very significant, where the outcome is a little dicey, where the event gets canceled.
Right. But a lot of times it's gonna it's gonna happen sometime during the game, and then you're gonna have to keep working.
Unfortunately, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
How do you usually feel after an emergency?
That's a good question. I would say I kind of feel like a little exhausted. Like, whew, okay. But I don't ever really feel, from what I remember, like emotionally taxed.
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
Like I feel exhausted.
Mm-hmm. Like physically.
Yeah, like physically, I'm like, ooh. All right, but like a lot of times, like, okay, let's just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. It's just a part of it for me is just, it's a part of the job, so being able to, okay, like let's refocus.
Mm-hmm.
And then if anything, I'm more interested in the follow-ups.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Making sure that everything's going good. Okay. Where are we at? Document stuff like that. So I definitely feel exhausted, but so far, knock on wood, I haven't had a situation where it's really emotionally shaken me.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you brought up physical symptoms because the first story that I brought up is from an anonymous listener. They wrote, had a really bad concussion hit in football that required activating EMS. It was my first time activating EMS for a head/possible neck trauma. I've had my share of orthopedic injuries, but nothing compares to seeing your athlete go limp after a hard hit and collapse face down. I was collected the rest of the game and remained calm, but the next day my body felt like I had gotten hit by a bus, or like the worst hangover ever, and I realized how hard of a crash post-adrenaline can be.
Yeah.
Because my athlete had a good prognosis, I was mentally in a good place because he was okay. I know we did everything on the field we were trained to do, but my body took a hit that I was never taught about in school. Sleeping helped, just the complete resting of my body and brain, so talking through things with other ATs to debrief as well.
Yeah, I think that debrief is important.
We have a lot of stories about debriefing.
Yeah,
that's upcoming.
I think it helps, especially for the young AT too.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a younger professional, right, you're not that far removed from the feedback of being an athletic training student. So, as you're on your own practicing, you still would kind of like, I'm still doing things right? Like I'm still doing a good job. Right. So I do appreciate the debrief, and, it's always important no matter what stage in your career you are to make sure, the processes and stuff were taken appropriately, or how could have gone better. Hey, here's where the hiccup was, whether it's the system or, like, hey, our system's kind of like, we're getting hung up here. How can we fix that?
I mean, that's just a throwback to the great episode that we did with Andy Paulin.
That's it, with Andy Paulin.
Throwback. We did an episode, I think it was dealing with death.
Yes, it was.
And he talked a lot about the debriefing process.
Yes, big time.
That was a while back. That's maybe like 2 years ago back.
Big throwback.
Yeah.
Anytime we can get an Andy Paulin reference, we'll take it.
Yes. So our next story is from Callie H. She said, we had a compound tib-fib fracture this year during our football state championship game. Everything went smoothly, thankfully, because of our EAPs and the amazing relationship with our team docs. Once we got him packaged and on his way to the ER, the emotions of it hit me. He is a kid I know really well. It was only the first quarter, and he had a promising wrestling season about to start. My heart just broke for him. We obviously had to move on with the game, but I took a minute to walk down the sideline to compose myself to keep working. I just had to compartmentalize and focus on the kids on the field who needed me. I talked to my athlete and his dad after the game. He sent us pictures from the hospital. I agree with the person that said ATs are well trained for what we do in an emergency, but not necessarily how to cope and finish a game or manage whatever emotions we have afterwards.
Oh, 100%. But I think that's what helps me is that compartmentalizing. Like, all right, it's just, we still have work to do. We still have, I still have X amount of other athletes that, I need to make sure they are okay as well, and I have to be there for them.
But then what about after that?
Exactly. After that, like I said, it's a lot of times that debrief does help make you feel good about it. In the situations we've been pretty quick on the debrief.
When do you debrief?
I think it goes case by case. If you could do it like after everything's kind of done, the game's done, if you have a chance to sit down and talk about while everything's still somewhat fresh, I think that can help. But if it was like if we're looking at like people are like super emotionally drained, hey, maybe now is not the time to talk about it. Maybe we need to take a day and bring it back up. So I think that kind of depends case by case. I like debriefing pretty quickly. Obviously not like it just happened. Okay, let's talk about it, right? Because there's still an event, right? But if we have a chance afterwards, all right, let's see where we're at. Let's go with the follow up. Let's see where they're at, and after we sent that person out, where are we going? And then, okay, what are the next steps? How did we do? What do we think? I remember that's how it was, like with Andy Paulin. Like every day not every day, but after every event, after everything was cleaned up, we would debrief on the day. Whether it was obviously an emergency situation or not, we would talk about the day. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? What needs? What do we need to get a little bit better at? Stuff like that.
That's good.
Yeah, it was cool.
It's also like a regular process at that point. It's not just like something new because there was an emergency.
Yes, and I try to do that as well with my students. Maybe not necessarily like a full debrief, but after they're done cleaning up, I do like to ask, okay, any questions? Any questions about the day? Or
just giving them space.
Yep. Or even giving them feedback, like usually after an event, after they're done working, I'll say, hey, like, great job on this. Hey, this is what I kind of want, a little bit better. Like stuff like that.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of surprised by the first couple stories being so physical because I think when I think adrenaline dump, I think more like emotion dump. I've had quite a few emergency situations in my career, but actually I haven't had to call 911 in the last almost 2 years.
Hey, whoa.
Hey, but I've had emergency situations since then. They just haven't gotten to the point.
Yeah.
I've sent people to the ER, but nothing like needs to transport.
I'm still
lately.
I'm knocking on wood.
Yeah, seriously. So I think for me, I'm trying to like think of the last time that I had to call 911, which was for a spine board.
Yeah.
But also like that was the third time I'd spine boarded.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, for me, I think it wasn't like, it wasn't new.
Yeah.
And obviously every emergency situation is going to be different.
Yep.
And each venue is going to be different. The
100%.
People you're with are going to be different.
The
EMS
response,
crew the EMS crew, so I think that it's a good idea to have general ideas how you cope.
Yeah.
And also just how you deal with stress in general. I know based on like some of the personality things I know about myself, I'm not one to go quickly into like the emotional side. Usually I force myself to go like the thinking route first. And so I'll just overthink usually. So I'm not usually finding myself in like that emotion center until someone else tells me how scary it is, and then I kind of realize like shit, like that was really scary. Yeah, that was scary.
Yeah.
And I think that's why this is also so interesting to me, because I don't know why I didn't think about that. You have your like people who go into like physical body thinking, people who go into like that thinking body, and people who go into that emotional heart center.
Yeah.
And so I think it just depends on like which one you really are.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
how that manifests for you. Because if you are someone who has like a body center, then you're probably going to have, more of those physical symptoms. You need to work out to after this to kind of get those jitters out, or maybe like take a walk on the sideline, like get those jitters out. If you're like an emotional center, you might need to like just cry and just get that out of your body. And then if you're a thinker, maybe you just need to debrief. You need to think about the situation, talk about it with someone. And you know, who's to say that we don't need all three of those things?
100%. Yeah. No, most definitely.
I'm really excited about this next story actually, because this one is...
You lived it.
I did.
You lived these ones.
I did. These are my first two, not my first two. Actually, my first emergency scenario as a student, and then my first emergency scenario as a certified.
And that was the first event that I saw you work.
Yep. And these are
so I was definitely good luck there.
From my first preceptor. You want to read it?
I think you should read these. These ones have your
so I can
experience
interject.
Okay, that's fair. All right, this one's by Callie L. 2 stories. Sandra was with me for both. Different football seasons. Both had adrenaline rush and dump.
And this is when I like first knew about an adrenaline dump. I didn't know what that was at first.
So the first one, a lower leg injury happened right in front of us, thankfully near our sideline. I stabilized a fibula that wasn't lined properly.
Basically, like proximal fibula dislocated proximally or anteriorly.
EMS wanted to take off the cleat for access to distal pulse, but obviously didn't understand anatomy and was going to make the fibular injury worse.
Which that's what we're talking about with like EMS. Sometimes you have people who don't, and obviously like you have to stay in your lane.
Yep.
But you also have to protect the athlete.
Yeah.
So like if you have a EMS person who's trying to do something that you know not to do, then you know, just have an educated conversation, not like a stand in your face like yelling match. Maybe that's not the best time to do that.
And also there's you know, we could find another way to get to that pulse.
Exactly.
Without physically taking off the shoe.
Right. I mean, eventually the shoe's going to have to be taken off, but
we can cut that off.
Right.
Wait, that shoe, we don't need that shoe.
I think I remember they were trying to like pull on it.
Yeah.
We're like,
hold on. Hey, hold on. Let's pump those brakes.
Okay.
But obviously didn't understand anatomy and was going to make the fibular injury worse. So I had to make them stop, and I found a distal pulse by reaching down the sock. It was before halftime, a coach's son, senior, lots of emotion.
Lots of emotion.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And I think that's also not that everyone gets that experience as a student, but it was so important and vital for me to get that as a student so I could see what someone was like when they're in pain.
Yeah.
And it doesn't excuse that, but like you can get that understanding of why that's coming out of them. And part of your role is, okay, if you can't deal with what's happening, maybe you have to deal with the person first.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, I mean, you always have to deal with the person first, but...
Yeah, 100%. After he was loaded and sent to the ER with his mom, we all had to refocus on the physical game. Nice deep breaths and discussing the steps, making it a teaching moment, helped us to refocus and avoid the dump.
And again, I remember, like, this was the first time I'd ever heard of an adrenaline dump, and... I'm definitely one of those people that's like very in my head. So like if you tell me there's going to be an adrenaline dump, like it's bet I'm going to have one. So like I didn't, I remember like not like it all had happened and then the ambulance drove away and, you know, we still had to do the game and Haley was like, yeah, so like it's normal to feel jittery afterward. It's normally if you feel emotional, it's normal if you need to take a second and like refocus. And I was like, oh, what are you talking about? Like, I'm fine. And then I was like, oh, like then my heart like started, like I started feeling my heart. And then I like look around and I realized where I am. And I kind of like, it was kind of like surreal.
Yeah.
Like, man, we were just helping out with the ambulance and we were like, we just had a kid who was in severe pain and we just kind of like went on autopilot. And I was like, I think that kind of like coming to is like, oh, that's okay. Okay. I always remember that like, I mean, I'm not a big crier. So like, I never like really cry after an emergency situation, but like, I definitely like can feel it in my throat.
Yeah.
Like I can, That's right. That's what I kind of get.
Yeah.
And then I just think and think and think. And then I just need to calm my brain.
Yeah, for sure. Second EMS time together. Interestingly, both were an away game. That's very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
That's a little bit different because, you're relying on, the host staff to also help instead of knowing your situation.
Yes. I've had a host AT who, freaked out.
Football player took an impact to his head and had neck flexion. Student athlete was prone on the field. We ran out, stabilized right away before anyone else knew what was happening. Numbness and tingling in arms and legs, barely wiggling toes. Coaches were pulling up the video for replay to understand.
This also, the kid had his helmet off. And so we should know with the helmet helps keep the head in line.
Yeah.
So when he went down, that was something that we had to think about when we were, because I took C-spine. So I had to use my thighs to keep him stable.
Yeah.
And because we didn't have a spine board, we didn't spine board him. So we just stabilized until EMS got there. And so I had to use my thighs so we didn't take off equipment. And we already had access to his airway.
Yeah.
So I literally just laid his head on my thighs so he would be in line. And then I was holding C-spine, but he didn't know what was happening. And so actually you can read that next sentence so it makes more sense.
We waited for EMS forever and had to constantly explain to the kid why he needed to stay still because he kept forgetting. He was like 10-second Tom from 50 First Dates. Our legs were numb from being there so long.
Yeah, so literally my pecs were so sore the next day because of me stabilizing because he kept trying to get up because he had a really bad concussion too.
Yeah.
And then EMS had gotten stuck behind a locked gate.
Oh my goodness. Love that.
Mm-hmm, and no one knew who had the key.
Of course.
So
EAP.
And what's funny is they didn't bring that key out because they had just called EMS the day before for something else, I guess. And the ambulance actually took a different entrance.
Route. Interesting.
So I don't know where the communication was that we couldn't just get through that other entrance.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously I was busy, but
just a hair, just a little busy.
Just a little busy.
I think we drank a whole bottle of water and Gatorade afterwards and replayed the events quietly to one another so nobody overheard us. As we wound down and refocused because we still had more game to play. Still to this day, those were some of the most emotional EMS situations. I've had a lot, but those come to mind. Thanks, Sandra.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. A piece of advice. With practice comes familiarity.
Yeah. I mean, we always say that we turn to our preceptors for things, but I think it really helped. I mean, Haley and I get along super well, but I think it super helped that we had been through those things together too.
Oh, definitely. For sure.
And then the next night, because that was when I had the back-to-back spine board, I had the next night the kid had a spinal contusion.
Yep.
Spinal cord contusion. And that was literally the next day. And so then I don't remember if I called her or texted her and I was like, so it's happened. A good thing that we practiced yesterday because I had to put it into action again today.
I was a part of that one.
You were.
I was a part of that one.
You were. I don't remember how I felt after that one.
Yeah,
I remember I just I don't remember if I called or texted Haley and then also one of my other preceptors, Pam, who I worked football with. Those were my two, I need to talk to these people.
Yeah.
So this next one's from Maddy S. She said, at the beginning of an emergency, if my heart rate is too high, my voice will shake. So I'll talk the athlete through a few deep breaths and do it with them so we can both calm down.
Smart.
Debriefing is also so important. It helps you process any trauma, talk about what you could have done better for next time, talk about what you know you did well, and just take a second to get all the thoughts out so you don't go home with them.
Oh, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
Mm-hmm. I like the beginning when she says, talking about her voice.
Yeah.
And that's really good recognition about yourself.
Yeah.
And
big time.
Being able to take care of your athlete.
Mm-hmm.
I think that also goes into something too that I forgot to say about the last one, but I think because I had 2 of my first big emergencies with Haley.
Yeah.
I think like seeing how she responded really helped me to like know how to respond afterward. Yeah. And I think that's kind of like what formed how I like de-stress and debrief.
Yes.
After, and how I keep working.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I liked the breathing part too, because like I feel the same where I have to move more purposefully in an emergency, like in an effort to slow myself down, because if not, I'll move way too fast and it's just gonna be unorganized.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't really, I can't really think about if I move like too fast or too slow.
Yeah, I literally have to try and in my head take a step back and see like I'm watching it outside of myself.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Because I'll move way too fast and it'll be unorganized.
Do you feel like that after too, like you're moving too fast, or do you feel like you slow down?
No, I don't feel that. Not after. Yeah.
I feel like I have to like, I mean, I kind of go on autopilot, but like,
yeah,
I'm trying to like, I can hear myself in my head going, okay, like access the airway, access this.
Oh,
like,
nice.
Just kind of like those steps.
Yeah.
Do you want to read this next one?
Yes, this one's by Anonymous. My most severe emergency was during a JV football away game. An athlete drops on the sideline. I run across the field with my varsity head coach, and I can already tell it's something really bad. I told my coach to just run for the rig that was parked on the other side of our concession stand and get EMS to us right away. Athlete was conscious but unresponsive and slightly combative. His coach was supporting his head and shoulder pads. He would not keep his eyes open, and his pupils were not responsive to light. He lost consciousness for 15 to 20 seconds. He was not responsive to any verbal commands. His left arm was slightly combative, and he was not moving his right arm much. Our JV coach ran over with the AED in case we needed it. Waiting for EMS to reach the field felt like forever.
It will.
Oh, it definitely will. Also, man, kudos on, again, EAP. Everyone knows their role, the support staff coming in.
You know what I was thinking while you read that? I am at a new place, and I don't know if my coaches, I mean, I'm sure I know our soccer coaches do, but I'm not sure if our other coaches know where our AED is in the black backpack.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, we just have a backpack that's like, airways, we have blood pressure cuffs, we have pulse ox, we have rectal temp, we have the AED, we have probably some other goodies in there that are just like basically anything. Oh, like glucose tablets, the glucometer, like all that stuff. Like if you need an emergency,
that's there.
We got it. The tarp.
Oh yeah, for tacos.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what else. There's probably more. Anyway, keep going.
We worked on getting his jersey and pads off, but it was pretty difficult. Our nearby hospital is a level 1 trauma center, and luckily a short drive. His scan showed a massive brain bleed, and he ended up passing away a few days later. It was very difficult to go through as an AT. The away team did not have an athletic trainer, and they had 2 other head injuries during that game.
Oof.
By far the worst game I've ever covered. My coping mechanism was to disconnect from work and spend time with family, specifically my parents. AT Cares did reach out, but I did not utilize them because I wasn't ready to talk about it right away.
And that's important to talk about too.
Big time.
Like sometimes it's if talking about it makes you shut down, like maybe it's not a good idea to talk about it just yet.
Yeah, for sure. I did take some time off, but only a few days where we didn't have games. I had a ton of support from my athletes, and they brought me a card that was signed by 100 plus of them. It was huge, and I still have it on my wall today. Local ATs reached out, and I confided in my closest ones. This event happened last year, this past fall when we played the same team in varsity. They had an athletic trainer travel with them. I was absolutely thrilled for them that they had someone to look out for them now. It also sent a huge wave of relief over to me because I had a little anxiety coming into that game. But it was all washed away. That's cool.
We've had a couple of people talk about having an emergency situation and then having to go back and work.
Yeah.
It's kind of like after getting in a car accident and having to like go drive.
Yeah.
Like that first time is it's going to feel different.
Yeah, big time.
I think we don't talk about that enough either.
Yeah, 100%. And, you know, I think what often it's hard to kind of teach students about is when you hear they were conscious but unresponsive.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really hard to kind of conceptualize what that means until you see it.
Right.
And, you know, in my emergency situation, that was the same thing, right? My athlete was conscious, but he was not responsive to his name. He was only responsive to pain.
Mm-hmm.
So if you create a pain stimulus, he would respond to it, right? Like it's really hard to kind of explain what that means and like what it looks like until you kind of hear it or see it.
Right. Or I know kind of also that feeling of like what to do.
Yeah.
Because like I've had a couple unconscious athletes. One of them who was it painful? No, it was verbal. I would say, I think it was when I would say his name that he would grunt.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I remember that.
And that's it. That's all I got from him.
Yeah.
And so like, what do? You just try to keep getting him to respond to you.
Yep.
Because you want to make sure that, and like try to get him to open his eyes, try to keep his attention or whoever you're working with.
Yeah. No, for sure.
I think that's something like that I know I'm finding our students do is like, okay, you check consciousness, but you have to keep checking consciousness. It's not just a one-time thing.
It can change.
It can change.
Midway.
Right. So this next one is from Lorena T. She said, in my career, I've been on both sides of the adrenaline dump and the debrief process. What I've learned more than anything was that community and support is essential. Having a safe space to process thoughts and emotions are fundamental to working through emergency situations and dealing with the aftermath. The first event was a couple years after becoming a full-time athletic trainer when one of our men's soccer athletes collapsed while playing intramurals and passed away on the way to the hospital. While there was no certified athletic trainer on site, a couple of our athletic training students were in attendance and participating in the games, and therefore responded to his collapse. I was called in by one of them shortly after the athlete was taken away in the ambulance, and I participated in a debrief outside the ER that night with the AT students, and then later the next day with the students and other ATs associated with the AT program who had lost an athlete or responded to a life-threatening emergency. Seeing the fear, bravery, self-doubt, and emotions those athletic training students and my peers demonstrated during the debrief was emotional. Even though I wasn't there when the athlete collapsed, after being asked, "How are you holding up?" I realized being so close to the situation, I also needed support and space to process, and that being there with everyone was a comfort for me, even though I had initially showed up wanting to help the students. Speaking to the AT students later, they were so grateful for all the people who attended the debrief and allowed them to process the unfortunate tragedy of losing an athlete. They would often comment years down the line how they never felt alone and felt supported.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially because like they weren't in AT mode.
Yeah.
Like they were participating themselves. Yeah. It was kind of like an outside event. Yeah. So they just kind of had to go into that like, oh, I happen to be an athletic training student.
Yeah.
You know.
Mm-hmm. And also too, you know, such a, you know, vulnerable time in their development as an athletic trainer, right? Just being an athlete. I mean, it takes a toll on everyone, but
do you still want to be an AT?
Yeah. You know, because, you know, that is kind of the reality. And, you know, some people have to go through something like that.
Mm-hmm. So she continues, the second event was when I personally responded to a rare catastrophic collision in the outfield at a baseball game. I was actually working softball, and one of our newly certified part-times, 2 months post-grad, was working baseball. I got the call at softball from my AD telling me to come quickly because there was a collision and it was bad. I didn't know exactly what had happened, but I knew he was calling me from softball. It had to be bad. When I ran onto the baseball field, I saw one of our baseball players lying motionless with his eyes open, significant blood coming from his left ear, and snoring a deep guttural snore I had never heard in my entire life and will never forget. I would learn later the collision happened when, at full speed, he dove for a ball and his head hit the knee of the right fielder running full speed. They never saw each other. Until EMS got there, I held C-spine while the left side of his body, uncontrolled by a brain injury, began to move as if he was trying to get up to the point his coaches and teammates had to help hold him down while I protected his neck and talked to him. It took approximately 12 minutes for EMS to get there, and during that time, I never stopped talking to him. I never stopped looking into his blank eyes, trying to get some type of response or recognition, which I was never able to get. After EMS got there and I transferred care, I was responsible for going back to cover the remainder of the softball game, which had been unattended while I was caring for my athlete. As I was walking back, prior to entering the softball field, I looked down on my watch to look at the time to realize there was a small amount of blood on my arm. Taking off my watch, what I didn't realize was there was much more going on underneath my wristband, and in that moment, I know I needed more time to collect myself before going on the softball field. But I had no time to fully process what I had just experienced. Luckily, my athlete was able to receive care quickly from a skull fracture so significant the doctor said he had never seen one in the athletic population.
Wow.
Only in severe car accidents. Luckily, the athlete has since physically recovered but has speech and processing issues. Having been part of the earliest situation of losing an athlete, I knew the importance of reaching out, asking for help, processing, and talking about it was most important. Over especially the first couple of days going into months after, I talked with the other AT who responded, his teammates, his coaches, my peers, and stayed close with the family. Finally, it didn't exist earlier in my career, but AT's care was also such a great and invaluable resource for me at that time too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and hearing her talk about this and just like how she responded after, and it's not just like, we've been talking a little bit just like the day of, the day after, but also like if you have an athlete who's recovering for a while, it's gonna exist that entire time too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
And then we just go back to that debriefing.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it is important because it gives you clarity of the situation and hopefully starts that, I don't want to say closure process, but it starts the processing of what happened.
Mm-hmm. And if you listen to our last story episode where we did a case study talking to Allison, she talked about how she debriefed with so many people, her boss, other ATs, the coaches, the police,
the campus safety
who was there.
Yep.
And they all had something different. All of the therapists that she talked to, so like they all had something different to add to the processing.
Absolutely.
You want to read this next one?
Yes. This one's by Meghan C. I remember my first and only time spine boarding an athlete. I was so nervous after that I made the wrong decision, etc. This was also my first year certified and only 4 months into working on my own.
Which,
wow.
I gotta say, I feel like though we got a lot of these stories, but part of them is because it's your most memorable.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And also because emergencies can happen at any time.
Yep.
There are some ATs who get like no emergencies, and then there are some ATs who get like a ton of them, but it's also going to be like, where are you working?
Yep.
You know, I don't want to generalize by sport, obviously, because like football, you're going to see what you're going to see.
And it's
a collision sport.
It's a higher risk.
Right. But then also like, sometimes I can work volleyball and there'll be no injuries, and then sometimes I can work volleyball and I get 2 dislocated shoulders. Yeah. So, you know, it's all about what just happens to be.
I reached out to debrief with a preceptor I'm still close with, which helped me calm my nerves a lot. Now, when I need to debrief, I talk to other high school athletic trainers that I've become friends with. A few weeks ago, I got a phone call from one of my colleagues who is also a great friend. She had an athlete who had a grand mal seizure and just needed to talk it out with someone. I think she was looking for reassurance that she took all the necessary steps, but I know she was burnt out and nervous over the situation that just unfolded in front of her. Debriefing, whether with a colleague or supervisor, is huge, not only to figure out what could be improved upon, but also for our mental health as athletic trainers. This is honestly huge and something they don't teach you in college.
No, and I think there's a bigger push for it now, and I think part of it is because of the bigger push with burnout.
Yep. Yeah, big time. Especially in the collegiate ranks as well. Like, you know, I've seen some stuff on NATA with like the college setting, like that council the committee that's kind of looking at it, that, you know, they're putting out a lot of stuff on how to make the collegiate setting a little more, because there is a lot of burnout amongst those levels. So making it a little, how can we change it to make it more valuable for, you know, clinicians in that setting?
Right. I know that any healthcare profession is going to have to deal with death or, you know, emergencies or, you know, you name it. But I also feel like it's different for athletic trainers specifically because of the relationship that we have.
Yes.
And I think that's what makes it, even though we have a lower incidence, I want to say, of emergencies. I mean, obviously we have a lot of emergency situations, but as far as like the actual death, hopefully it's a lot lower than, obviously if you work in the emergency department or if you work in a hospital in general, like you're going to see that a lot. Even if you work like EMS, you're going to see that a lot. But I think the difference is, well, one, the resources that we have out on the field, and then two, the relationship that we have with the people who we're dealing with.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, most definitely.
And I also want to point out that like a lot of these, like what we're talking about is like, oh, like talk to your preceptors or like who, like those are just like kind of built-in mentors. But maybe you had a set of preceptors who you just don't feel like as comfortable with. Like you can talk to anyone, like colleagues. You can talk to your parents. You can talk to
AT's care.
Your friends. You can talk to AT's care. You could talk to us.
Yeah,
We've
that's
gotten
true.
some messages.
We have.
Yeah. We'll get on a phone call with you.
Yeah, most definitely. 100%.
But anyway. Oh, I also like this next one from our MVP Nicolette.
MVP Nicolette!
She said, I always talk through and debrief with observation students. They always ask the more basic questions or questions you overthink or breeze over during an emergency situation or scenario. It's helping a lot when making sure that I covered all aspects.
Oh, that's true.
And the thing that I really liked about this is because like we have our own process of like processing and like, you know, you could go through like 30 different emergency situations and that could be your observation students or your athletic training students like first time seeing that.
Yeah.
And how scary is that for them?
Oh, for sure.
Especially if they don't really know what an athletic trainer is or they don't know that, you know, you deal with emergency response.
Yeah,
like
for sure.
That could be really scary.
Oh,
so I think that including them is really helpful.
Yeah. No, most definitely.
And also that's a really good point that like them asking questions.
Yeah.
I think debriefing on the ride home, like usually like driving back from an away game or like after we pack up is usually like when I do the debrief process.
Yeah. Well, yeah, like you said, because if it's an away game, right?
The easiest is like while you're driving.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
You have everyone sitting down
in one spot.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
So this next one's about coping for like breathing.
Okay.
So Spencer P said, I had a football player with a heat stroke who was unresponsive to verbal and painful stimuli.
Oof.
Rectal temp read 104 when we rubbed him. It took 20 minutes for him to become responsive. It looked like the temp was coming down, but when they finally got him in the ambulance, his temp was still 101. It was my second week at this job, and I was the only certified with a new doc. We called 2 other ambulances that day because of cramping. I remember calling my mom that night and just sobbing. We found out the next day a player at a different school had passed from EHS.
Oof.
Really made the situation that more real to me.
Mm-hmm.
This athlete went on to sign with an NFL team as an undrafted free agent, reached out to me that night for saving his life and how he maybe wouldn't have made it here without me. He and I had a different bond after what we went through together. Really puts it all into perspective. Coping for me, honestly, is just trying to breathe and tackle one thing at a time. Definitely wasn't able to truly process how traumatic it was until afterwards. But in the moment, you're focused on comforting others, so you don't really even process your own feelings.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, so just like, you know how people say, like, just take it one day at a time.
Yeah.
It's like, afterward, just take it 1 minute at a time. Like, don't try to think about, like, what's what's the future. Like, just try to be in the present. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
So this actually made me realize, so there was this athlete who was, like, really trying to figure out, I was like, man, you look so familiar. And she was like, yeah, I this is my first year at the school. Like, I wasn't here last year. I wasn't here like years before. Before this, like, I was in high school, and these are my high schools that I went to, and like blah blah. And I'm like weird. And she was like, I thought you looked familiar too. And I was like, man,
Can't place you.
Like, literally, I was like, I am trying to figure out how I know you, because I know you. This is not like you have a familiar face. Like, I know you. I've talked to you. I got to figure this out. And so then I was like, did you do any club sports or like anything out of your sport? And she was like, I mean, I ran at the relays of this like big like multi-sport, multi-college or multi-high school relays. And I was like, I worked that.
Yep.
And then I realized that I had her in a very vulnerable emergency situation, and that I had kind of like, we had dunked her in the tub, and then I had talked to her parents, and like, so I had responded to her when she was participating in her activity. Yeah. And then now she's like gone on, and so like I knew there was something. So like, it really does make a bond.
It does. It's true.
So like years later, like obviously like I wasn't working at her high school. I just was working in that event. But crazy.
That's crazy. That's cool.
Yeah. You want to read the next one?
Yes, this one's by Sarah Y. I go into what I call AT mode. Oh, absolutely. 100%. I focus on the athlete and task at hand and do what needs to be done. After that, then I can deal with the emotions. I've had a few that really stuck with me over the years. During football season, a visiting athlete was down after lowering his head to tackle one of my athletes. He immediately drops and doesn't move. The visiting team's doctor got to him first and stabilized his neck because the player said he couldn't feel anything from the neck down. Couldn't determine sharp versus dull sensation. Could move fingers to grip, but it was very weak. Couldn't move his toes. EMS was already at the game, so we got them on the field and got the kid braced and spine boarded. The whole time this kid was alternating between, I can't feel my legs and I'm only 17. The whole time I kept talking to him and tried to calm him. Once he was taken by EMS, the visiting team doc thanked me for my help and told me if he heard anything before the game was over, he would let me know. I later found out the athlete was okay and regained sensation and strength in the emergency department.
That's good.
Yeah, absolutely. After this happened, which was in the middle of the first quarter, I had to stand on the sidelines and keep it cool. I couldn't talk to anyone or I'd start crying, and I knew it. At halftime, I broke down sobbing in the weight room attached to the locker room. My boyfriend had followed me into the locker room and held me as I sobbed. He was also there, thankfully, to get my head back in the game because my team needed me. That was enough to snap me out of it and get it together. The funny part to this is one athlete tried to come get his wrist taped at halftime, saw I was crying, said, nope, and immediately turned around and left. I'm not a crier. If I wasn't able to get the emotions out, it would sit in my brain and lead to a breakdown at a really inopportune time.
Mm-hmm. So you got to take care of yourself first.
You do? Absolutely.
You don't want that to come out when you don't need it to.
Absolutely. And you know what? It is okay to cry.
Mm-hmm.
It is okay to experience your emotions.
Mm-hmm. So we had what I really liked about this was she was talking about spine boarding the kid and then like he regained function and everything. Yeah. I think what's so common is people are going to say like, oh man, like I made the wrong decision. I didn't need a spine board. Like, but you're looking at the situation as if you knew that information back when you were trying to evaluate the situation.
Deal with this situation.
And I think we have to separate those two and be like, at the time of, so like my latest spine board was fine, which is good.
Yeah.
But at the time of the situation, it was bilateral numbness and tingling, loss of sensation, neurological symptoms that pain in the neck,
Yep.
pinpoint pain in the neck, and apprehensive to move it.
Pull the position statement.
so
what does that tell you?
In what world
Yeah.
would I be comfortable
Yeah.
with letting that kid get up?
100%.
So, and I think that's like something that people go through with any
Yeah.
situation. It's like, man, should I have made that based on what we know now? Like, if you send an ACL tear that's not torn, you're like, okay, but based on what you were feeling, are you comfortable with, I mean, you made that decision for a reason. And I think you have to go back to that.
Oh, yes, most definitely.
You have to go back to that. Then another thing that she said was AT mode.
Yes.
AT mode. That's definitely something that we got a lot. Maddy S said, okay, one good thing to talk about is the difference of responding to an emergency when you're working in the clinic versus working an event.
That's true.
This is exactly my argument for working football versus like baseball or softball. Because like football, soccer, like those, like you're on your toes, you're like ready to go. Whereas like baseball, softball, or volleyball, like you're kind of just like enjoying the game.
Yeah.
And then something like
happens.
Something bad happens, you know? Someone gets hit in the face with the ball.
Yeah, that's true. You never know when it's going to happen.
That happened to me the other day. I'm just sitting in my office and someone runs in. Someone got hit in the face with the ball, and I was like, "Oh no."
Oh, great. Love that.
Yeah, my least favorite. So Maddie said, when working an event, I'm in go mode. I'm fully prepared to handle anything that comes my way, even people in the stands. One time I was in the clinic and somebody ran in telling me a kid was seizing in the locker room. My brain was blank. I didn't grab any emergency equipment. I was able to delegate and tell people what to get, who to call, etc. once I got everything sorted. But it's so hard to turn your brain into emergency mode when you're just relaxing in the clinic doing paperwork.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to talk about response to all types of scenarios and how to get your brain into emergency mode in scenarios like that.
Yeah, for sure. It is a tough switch.
Mm-hmm.
And then that too is like when you're working an event, you know where everything's at. You have all your stuff.
You also have everything.
Yeah, you have it
like,
with you.
If you get called out while you're in the clinic.
Yeah.
And I thought about this the other day because I was like, well, I brought, so I thought it was going to be bloody. So like I already had my gloves on.
Yeah.
I walk out and it was fine.
Yeah.
So like, okay, well, normally at an event you have like your splints, you have the AD with you, you have the, your kit, you have your fanny pack. Whereas like, you're not going to carry all of this, the crutch bag, you know, you're not going to carry all those things when you run out to an emergency.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, well, do you take the time to ask for more information to figure out what you need?
Yeah.
Or do you just kind of grab stuff and go?
Also, you know, the people that usually run in to tell you things are going down,
they're just the runner.
They don't tend to gauge sometimes very well
the
nature of what's happening.
No.
There's a difference between he can't walk. There's a difference in that statement to me than probably what they're thinking. And I go out there and the kid's like hobbling. Okay, well, he's limping, but he's walking.
Right.
He can't walk sounds different to me.
Right.
Then. So sometimes, and it's not the person who came running in's fault. They're not expected to know. But again, it just makes it harder to determine what am I bringing out.
Right, right. Well, also you have to think like splints, you can send someone to grab those. You can stabilize until someone can grab the splints.
Yep.
A towel is always a good thing to have if it's going to be bloody.
Yep.
For your AED, obviously you're going to want that if in any situation that you think is an AED is going to be necessary, because that's something you don't necessarily want to send someone back to get if you already have, if you can already grab it.
Yeah.
You know. What else? Like your main kit, what's going to be in that versus like your fanny pack?
Yeah.
Like your fanny pack's probably going to be more like gauze, gloves, tape, like emergency, like quick stuff. Or like I keep my pulse ox and my face mask, my emergency face mask in there.
Mm-hmm.
So like stuff like that. So if you need like a quick thing, you can, you know, but obviously some people have more or less.
Yeah.
Some people don't have their little kit. So, you know, what's going to be fast for you?
Yeah, 100%.
crutches, you can send someone back to get.
Yes.
C-collar, you can send someone back to get.
Yes.
So, but you don't think about all those things.
No.
They're just like, we need help. We need someone.
Oh, yeah. And it's always a panicked.
Mm-hmm.
Always panicked.
Mm-hmm. But that kind of goes into our last story of like, this emergency can happen at any time.
Yeah. Emergencies don't let you know when they're coming.
Except for my one random seizure.
Oh, yeah.
They told me. They told me.
Yeah.
So she's wearing this. She's going to pass the finish line.
She's
going to
seize.
Okay.
She'll be okay.
Okay.
I don't think I'd take that seriously at first. I'd be like, wait, what? No. What? For real?
I mean, it was my first time working for this like place, so I was like, okay. I didn't think they were going to joke with me.
Yeah.
I've had to run out.
That's one of those comments at that point. It's like, I don't think running's for you.
I had the same at the same event. I had someone who was like wheezing asthmatic, like wheezing, almost couldn't like stand, and she was like trying to basically like charades to tell me that her inhaler was in her car, but she was like trying to run to her car, and I was like trying to figure out like, okay, like drive, okay, car, like keys, where are your keys, like trying to like charades figure this out. And then it's like, okay, well maybe we should like calm your breathing down first, and then you can talk enough so that we can get your inhaler. Yeah. You know?
Yeah.
It's an interesting event.
That was an interesting event. Again, the one with the seizure, I don't think running's for you.
Hey, that's what she loves.
I know, I'm just saying. I think other sports.
I mean, you would know best of all the runners. Like just this weekend I had someone who was like throwing up. He brought his own bag because he said, "This is normal for me. I bring my own bag because I know it's gonna happen."
You know what?
And I'm like, you know what? I'm grateful for you.
I have had an athlete like that too. Every time he'd finish a race, he looked like crap and would throw up. And we had him see our team doc. We tried to rule everything out. That's just what he does.
I also had a kid who just said like, "Yeah, I normally just pass out after the race," and I was like, okay. Yeah. So then I asked him like his recovery techniques, and I just asked both those kids, honestly. I was like, and you just choose to keep running? And they're like, yeah, I love it.
You know, good for you. Yeah. Again, only in
just
track.
A minor inconvenience.
Only in track. Notice how each one of these scenarios that we pulled up have all revolved around track. You know what? It's funny. I actually had a conversation with one of my athletic training students yesterday about how, not to get off topic, but if there's going to be a weird injury or something that you just don't see coming, or something that you're just looking at the person like, what?
My baseball team?
Well, there's that. Well, for you, yeah. But it's going to be track. Like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what these athletes do. If there's going to be something that you have to like hand on forehead moment, it's track. I had a student athlete chased by a coyote. No other. You're not hearing that happen to football. Basketball is not coming in with, hey, by the way, last night I got chased by a cat. No.
Nope, they're coming in with, by the way, last night I got chased by a raccoon during a game.
They weren't chased. The raccoon was just as scared as everybody else. We had a visitor at one of our basketball games. It was actually the first basketball game at my employer.
You should put... Oh, it was really? It was your first one?
That was the first one I covered.
See, we love firsts.
Yeah, I had a raccoon.
Actually, speaking of, this is what we're talking about. An emergency can happen at any time.
I segued that without even knowing I did.
So, Anonymous says, I was covering a district softball game for one of the schools the company I work for covers. They are not my usual school, as I was assigned to them for the summer due to my coworker having other commitments. Last game I would cover at the school for the summer, and our left fielder took a hard hit in the outfield fence/pole going for a foul ball. Oof. I didn't see the actual impact due to the dugout in the way, but I knew it was bad because of the sound the athlete hitting the fence was not a normal sound. Once I got to her, she did not look like herself, and I had a gut feeling she wasn't right. I made the decision to have someone call 911. Let's also add, I had just passed my BOC and graduated in May,
Of course.
and had only been working on my own with this company for a month exactly on this date.
Of course.
Once she got transported, I was in shock of what had just happened. Did I just make that call for EMS? I sent the school's AT a message of what happened and then texted my boss and mentor of the situation. I stayed away from the crowd, but still available if anything was needed for the rest of the game to calm myself down. After the game and once I got home, I called my mentor and we debriefed it. Went well through the whole situation. The next day, I sat down with my boss and we discussed it as well. The athlete was okay in the end. 1 month on my own, and I already had to activate EMS. Welcome to the profession. Overall, it took me about a week to process, accept, and move on. It did take a while, and then that's when practices started to feel more comfortable, and I was confident in myself again if anything happened.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So overall, I think what coping mechanisms? We talked about debriefing.
Debrief.
We talked about breathing. We talked about walking down the sideline.
Yeah. Crying's okay.
Crying. We talked about hydrating.
Yeah, hydrating.
All the sleeping, like the physical symptoms. Talking to AT's care.
Yep.
We
did a lot. Got a lot done.
Was that? Those are most of the
compartmentalizing.
I think those are working out. So again, like that physical versus body versus emotional, or I mean, body, head, heart. Right? Those are 3. Body, head, heart. Yeah. Head thinking.
Yes.
Body feeling, heart emotional.
Emotionally feeling.
Emotions. Yeah.
We like emotions here.
So if you guys are new, we do every other episode as education or stories. This one is a story episode.
Yes.
Next week we're going back.
But it is educational.
It is educational. Then we're going back to our education episode next week. I'm just mixing them up.
Yeah. You're so excited.
I am. It is a reporting year, so if you want some CEUs, we have some free CEUs. Our latest CEU episode is always free. So make sure you check that out.
Yes, and it's never too early to start. You know, we're in April. You don't want to get into December oh no, also I need 50.
Yeah, there's only one free one at a time, and then their latest 3 are $1, and then the ones after that are
full price,
but they are still affordable.
Yes.
So check out our website, our Instagram for those.
And it does contribute to the show.
It does contribute to the show. We also are partnered with MedBridge, so you can use code ATCorner for $150 off. And I think that's all. Oh, we have a Facebook group, facebook.com/group/ATCornerPodcast.
It's pretty cool.
And I think that is all of our fine print.
Yes.
Again, find everything in the show notes. If you're looking to add to a future story episode, make sure you head over to either our Instagram stories or to our Facebook group, because I need to update that.
Yes.
Where we usually post about what upcoming stories there are. And that's it.
Perfect.
All right.
Thank you for helping us showcase athletic training behind the tape. Bye.